Welcome to the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Trish.
And this is our podcast. We talk about wrestling news and various topics from different promotions, primarily AEW, but also New Japan Pro Wrestling, WWE, and topics from around the wrestling world. Whatever we find interesting, and we hope you will too. We are a proud member of the Social Suplex Podcast Network, and you can find our content on our podcast feed, the Social Suplex Podcast feed, as well as on Twitter, Blue Sky, and YouTube. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and rate our podcast. We also have a store at Chopped Tees, so if you'd like to support us or just own some really nice merch, please take a look at chopped-tees.com/collections/Social Suplex Network. Today is Sunday, March 30th, 2025, and Trish and I are going to kick off today with a look at the road to WrestleMania. Which has had some incredibly stunning developments over the last couple of weeks. Gunther and Jey Uso had brawls. I think we're up to 15 or 16 brawls now between the Usos. Jey Uso lost his confidence and is being pushed to get that back. Tiffany Stratton and Charlotte Flair had a promo segment in which neither one of them looked good, neither physically nor in terms of their ability to give the promo. And Io Sky and Bianca Belair and Rhea Ripley are headed towards a three-way that everyone is sort of disappointed by. Trish, where are you on this road to WrestleMania? Have you pulled over to change a flat tire? Have you abandoned it for a side road? What are your thoughts?
Have I got to point at the screen before we start? Is that like compulsory? Oh my. Yeah, point at the screen.
Point at the screen.
So, everybody keeps telling me that WWE is hot. And
everybody or just one person?
Lots of people. But you can be hot and you can be creatively kind of starting to hit the buffers. And if you look at WWF in kind of, maybe, late 1999, early 2000, going through that period, you would find something that maybe feels a little bit similar to what we're seeing right now. And I know, a lot of people have now used a comparison to WrestleMania 2000. I think the first person I heard do that was kind of Todd Martin, and it kind of does stick in your head because they are running a ton of kind of multi-man, multi-women matches because they have all these people that they elevated up to a point, and now you have all these stars and you need to fit everybody in, but you don't want to leave anybody out, with one notable exception, which we'll get to later. So you have this situation where you're not going to make anybody happy because you're trying to make everybody happy. And that's kind of the theme in this, but there's kind of so many things where what they're doing will end up more damaging in the long run. And it's not just the build to this event, which kind of would make you kind of concerned creatively for them for the future. So I think we should probably start at the top, and then the two, the night one and night two main events. So we'll start with the actual main event with Cena and The Rock. So when we did the last podcast, it was right before Cena's first promo in Brussels, and we all kind of wondered what it would look like. Would we see a more corporate Cena? Would we see something different? Would he change his look? And the first promo, I thought there was a couple of things that I thought were really interesting. So he didn't change his look, and he said, it's because I'm not going to do anything to kind of play the heel or kind of change for you. But it also it's an absolute giveaway that they did not plan this long term. Oh yeah, because they had so much merch to shift in Brussels. Same in London. I've seen it this week. People were sending me pictures of all the t-shirts and the hats and everything they had on sale. So yeah, this is like you have to adapt because you've got all this stuff to sell. And Cena's your big merch guy at the moment. I think he was top on the last stuff WrestleNomics did as well on merch. So they're trying to incorporate all these things at the same time. So he still looks like the same John Cena. He's still going to talk like the same John Cena. He's going to do that, what do you call it? The fans, you turned on me, I didn't turn on you, and the blame the fan stuff. And it's
people.
Really, you people, that's the one I'm looking for, thank you. And it really didn't make any sense, because it's like for the last 6 years, you've been cheered. You've been cheered completely. This is maybe the promo you could have cut in 2012 if you turned when people wanted you to turn then. Then this promo would have fit. But instead, it kind of felt completely out of place. But the biggest thing that I found in all of this is that it just felt so impersonal. So I didn't believe Cena saying it, but I also didn't believe that Cody had any role in it whatsoever, which feels crazy when you think that big closing angle elimination chamber and the next title match is him versus Cody. It could be him versus anybody. Yeah. This is just Cena talking about Cena. The Rock? Where's The Rock? No one knows about The Rock. That never happened. We don't talk about The Rock. We don't mention The Rock. The impetus for all these things. Did Cena sell his soul? Does he still have a soul? Is he a Dementor? Who knows? We don't know. We've not addressed it. Go on.
I just think it's funny because see, this is the laziest possible version of this, and it's hard not to feel like some of the fans are catching on to how lazy this is. Like you said, where they're not willing to change his look because they don't want to lose out on the merchandise that they've already created that they want to sell. They're not going to try and do anything personal. He's just going to stand there and cut what a lot of people, I've seen people suggest that Vince McMahon wrote that promo for him. That
it sounds like that.
Yeah. That, and which I don't think, I think that there are probably enough people left in WWE who could write a Vince McMahon promo that they didn't need to do that. But it's not surprising. The whole, you people, there's nothing personal. Cody got the shit beat out of him. He actually bled at Elimination Chamber. And then the next time he sees Cena, they come out and they stand in the ring across from each other with microphones and do nothing.
It was so funny, right? Because he didn't even just stand there and come out and do nothing. His music played. Yes! He did his full entrance. He gets down on the ramp. He slaps all the hands. He gets up on the turnbuckle and does his pose to the wall thing. Then he gets in, and then he talks to him normally. No anger, nothing like he promised on the SmackDown before, just nothing. And it's just the same. And then they repeat it 1 week, 2 weeks, and hey, we're going to get the third round on Monday. It's
it certainly seems like that. There's nothing to this. And then is Cena gone until WrestleMania? He's not advertised for any additional dates. Are they even gonna see him again until that's over with?
They're gonna have to, because you're gonna have to need something more than this. And the funny thing is that I couldn't help but compare it to what Hangman and MJF did. Because if you think about the start of that program, the animosity was at the start, that big thing was what drove it. So you then had something where they have the pull apart brawls and it kind of breaks out. So you get that physicality, that reaction out the way.
Right.
And then you do the kind of really kind of analytical talking stuff where they pick each other apart. Well, this is the complete opposite. So we have this huge heat angle, and the follow up is Cody doesn't really care that much, and Cena doesn't really care about Cody that much, and he was gonna win the belt anyway because he's got Elimination Chamber, so he's was it about Cody? And then he just doesn't really address him. They don't look at each other. There's really easy lines to go down in terms of, this is your replacement. This is the guy the crowd replaced Cena with.
Right.
This is the guy the company replaced Cena with. He's the nearest to John Cena in terms of presentation and everything else that they've had since John Cena. These are easy lines. And then, you finally get into, play on the fake, we're going to win the 17th title thing. But again, it's just so impersonal. And that's why it feels like Vince McMahon's kind of WWE stuff. Because this is what we've seen for decades. This is where they were kind of getting an advantage in the last few years because they moved away from that. And things became more personal. And, they pulled at those strings and they looked at what made up these characters. And now we're exactly back to what we've seen before.
Well, you pointed out the benefit of change. You pointed out the benefit of this Elimination Chamber angle to the build to this, because otherwise it would have been face, and how interesting was this? Could this possibly have been? And now you have a clearly defined heel and a clearly defined face, and that should make things easier. And then it seems like they didn't do any of that. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of difference in this program from what must have originally been the plan.
Maybe that's it. Maybe, you know, they've decided not to deviate from what they originally planned out. And then, so this turn for Cena that may have been discussed for WrestleMania has been sped up. It's just bland and not engaging in any way for what should be a mega heel angle. You know, this should be carrying them quite literally through the entire year. And yet we didn't see, you know, from their Netflix numbers, and with the parenthesis that you know the length of the episode changes, and you know it being the first Raw in Europe that's going out at 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. Eastern time, depending on the time difference, because we're just hitting British summer time now and everything else. But like there was no difference. There's no number difference. Did it is it spiking anything else? Did it spike a run of ticket sales for WrestleMania? No. Although if you've seen the pricing for WrestleMania, that's probably not surprising.
Yeah.
But there's not a measurable increase from something that should be, you know, one of the biggest things that they could possibly do. And that kind of feels like another one of the themes is as well. They're throwing out some of the biggest things like that they promise people long term.
Yep.
And it doesn't feel like there's any movement. And maybe there doesn't need to be, is the way they look at it, you know, because this is about sustaining where they are. But, you know, when we talk about Endeavour, or what they are now, now they've been taken over by Silver Lake, you know, the whole point with TKO is like, you don't stay where you are. Everything progresses forward.
Yep, they got to do better every quarter. They've got to exceed expectations every time, every projection, or the stock market takes a hit.
Yeah, so then you get into kind of shock and awe, and this is probably the biggest shock and awe that you could do. And I just don't see kind of what I expected to see from it. You know, I did expect, when it happened, I thought, wow, this is such a huge thing. This should be, you know, this should really propel them. And it feels so static. And I do wonder if that is because they're in Europe, you know.
Well, I was literally going to ask you, like, do you think that doing this European tour right before WrestleMania was a mistake? Is this adding to some of the issues with this build? Like, is it, you know, do you think there's a correlation between these two things?
See, it's so funny, isn't it? Because when they moved this tour, so this tour would traditionally be held kind of end of April, start of May.
Yep.
And it would be like a come down tour from WrestleMania. So you know, we wouldn't tend to get everybody that you would expect on these tours. You know, the TV would be kind of very hit and miss. You know, you would have a lot of big names missing, and it was kind of like, well, you get TV, so you'll get what you're given. But there's two sides to this. So you look at it and think, is this because it's an extended kind of build to WrestleMania that they thought it would better get in there? Is it because they thought the crowds would be better? And in a way, you know, they got great crowd response in Brussels for Cena's first promo, maybe more vocal and more reactive in the right way than they would have got in the US. So in that aspect, you can think, okay, that probably works out better for us. But it does very much feel like the traditional European tour of kind of phoning it in while you're on this tour until you get back to the US. And I didn't expect that to happen. I thought they were really going to go for this, being it was in the build, and think about, you know, they want site fees in Europe. And Europe's one place where they're not really, since Wales, you know, they aren't really achieving site fees as much as they are when they have these big shows in the US. So I thought, you know, you start building your big product there, you kind of illustrate yourselves in that aspect, and it's just none of that. So it's just repetitive. You know, I was talking to someone who went on Friday for SmackDown. It was like the matches are just kind of feel thrown together. There doesn't seem to be any kind of through point through some of these shows, and they're long and they're expensive. And, you know, the thing about Europe is Europe used to be like their safeguard, right?
Yep.
So even when they were falling to pieces in the 2000s, you know, they could go to Europe and they could do really well. And actually, it's kind of funny because Europe is at times showing kind of some of the weaker signs.
Yeah.
And it's very easy because I think the whole thing about their live event strategy over the last few years is that you reduce the amount of shows, so you increase demand. And so they've done that with the house shows. So now you only have TV pretty much in the US, and then your holiday tour. So everything has increased demand. And in Europe, you know, they've never had that issue. They could tour 2 times a year and they would have the demand there. And this time around, it's like the price has exceeded somewhat in the demand in some locations.
Yeah.
And even like on Friday, this is something probably interesting to keep an eye on as they come into WrestleMania season, because we know how many events during that week are, what did WrestleVotes call it? Underwhelming sales.
Yeah.
Currently, is that, in London, they didn't reduce the prices. Not like they did in Barcelona, where everything went down on the lower tier to €45. They didn't reduce anything.
Bologna too, right? They were also
Yeah.
reducing there.
Yes. So they did in some of the European dates, but they didn't in London. And consequently, that floor didn't fill up. People didn't buy them tickets. It's not like UFC. It's not going to sell out every time. There's the tour they've got coming up in August. They've moved back to the smaller venue in Manchester from the newer venue, which is the much more expensive one, because they didn't do enough there last time to justify the kind of impact that running that venue has. So there are kind of interesting signs in Europe, more so than there is in the States right now, which is kind of an interesting position for them to be in. But they did have one talking point on the SmackDown show on Friday night, and it was the announcement of the night one main event. So Sarah, you watched.
Sorry.
Go on. You watched this segment.
I did. I actually put this on before we started recording because I was like, I do want to see this. It was like, part of me was threatening to watch the Punk Stephanie McMahon interview, but even that sounded so boring that I was like, well, this might be better. I was. It's a lot for me to watch a WWE segment, even an abridgment of one. But I think what struck me about this was that the segment was like 17 minutes in length. And I genuinely think that like 8 or 9 minutes was just entrances and the crowd chanting. Like they just don't do anything. And nothing happened, right? Like you have Seth come out and he makes a comment about, the Shield history and, talking to Roman. And then he's pissed about Punk. And then the crowd is alternately shouting for Roman. And I have to give Roman a lot of credit, right? That guy has he's very good at manipulating the crowd to do what he wants them to do without giving the appearance that he's doing it. Like sometimes with guys, you can really see how like MJF is very obvious when he's attempting to manipulate the crowd sometimes. And like with Roman, you're like, oh, this is very subtle. Like he just says one word and the crowd goes berserk and starts chanting his name. He was like shitting on Punk during the segment, which I enjoyed because he was like, all right, hurry up. What the fuck's going on? Like, and I enjoyed that. But it was just so false in some ways. Like Seth was the only one who was like even trying to pretend like there was any emotion involved. Punk is fake crying over getting the night one WrestleMania main event, which I was absolutely fucking howling over because they're like, Heyman's like, your dream has come true. You're going to be a main eventer. And I just kept going, night one, because like everybody knows they're not the same. And like maybe a couple of like the Punk stans can convince themselves that like this is actually meaningful, but like it's a joke. It's the same burden. The guy, there's a reason why that whole buy one of the, buy three, get one, whatever night extravaganza they shit on MJF for. Yeah, because this is such a clear and obvious, like the guy should have just done a little bit of better job. Like he set it up so good to shit on him. Anyway, but it was just fascinating how soulless it was. And like, how even the people who like glaze Punk constantly are like, this is a disappointment, because you can clearly tell that Punk himself is not happy with this, like either the execution of it or the way that it's gone out. I don't know. The whole thing just seems really strange to me. And like people are trying to convince themselves, like I saw a bunch of conspiracy theories this week that in reality Punk's going to beat Roman and Seth, and then he's going to get added to Cody versus Cena, and that's going to be the actual swerve, and that's going to be really cool. And I'm like, that's not fucking happening.
That's also not a main event either.
No,
it's like saying it's like saying Christian Cage main evented Revolution.
Right, like you're just gonna make this shit up in your head. Like he's gonna, like, I don't know, like that's the part where I'm just like, it's like there's this weird consistent belief from WWE fans that there's some kind of grand master plan, that like something long term. Like I feel like this whole bullshit that Heyman tried to sell everybody about like the bloodline being in like act 1 of like a 9-act play or whatever. Like they actually believed it, and now they think that like shit's gonna happen, when in reality, like it really does seem like Triple H is kind of out of ideas, which is fine. Like we've seen it, and it's hard to be a booker, but like at this point, there's just not that much exciting about this.
It's kind of funny to me in a number of ways. I just thought it was hilarious. I because you've given this guy what he always said he wanted. After he's you know, gone out and done interviews where he's basically said, you know, I was the bad guy and that's why I left, and then I come back and I've sorted myself out and will forget everything else that ever happened. And, you know, he has to play along, has to toe the line on his behavioral clauses.
He has the flagellation that he has done and the ass kissing that he has done to get whatever he's been promised or told is unbelievable, right? And the funny part is how so few people see how debasing it is for him to be doing all this shit. I'm like, you guys think that this is like me, like, come on.
But it's hilarious because you didn't get what you wanted. You actually ended up in exactly the same spot you were when you left. So you're the secondary person on the card. You're in the second match down. Well, that's where you were WrestleMania 29, wasn't it? You Undertaker, Rock and Cena. Exactly the same spot. And, you know, I saw a Justin Barrasso article today and it was just like, well, Punk gets his WrestleMania event and then that ... sort of. And that's it. This will always have an asterisk because it isn't the main event of the show. It's not the poster that's going out everywhere. It's the night one. And I know some people don't like us talking about night one as though it's not the main event or a main event because of other people that have main event in this one. It's not. It's the same way when people want to talk about like quarter 8 on Dynamite being the main event when the main event's in quarter 1 or quarter 5. It's like, stop it. But it's like this thing where there's a perception thing. But this is coming about a guy that was telling everybody that he thought he had a chance of main eventing the whole thing 3 months ago. Yeah, he can tell you what he thinks is important. So it's like, but what's even funnier is the damage it does by the way that they've done this. So there's no earning of a main event here.
Nope.
There's no title involved, or not even. There's no chamber winning. There's no rumble winning. It's a plot device. Yep. This main event is so important that you get it by a plot device, by a gift from Paul Heyman, and that's enough for you to be a main eventer in WWE. And this goes against absolutely every single thing they actually did right in the last few years.
Yep.
It goes against, and this is a thing, this is the whole feel of this build, and this goes for this freeway, and it goes for the women's title freeway as well. And it's like, you tricked everybody, and it is a trick in a way, but you taught everybody that they could trust you, that things mattered. That if you win things, then you're rewarded. If you do well, you move up the card, and you're rewarded. So even if you get hot, someone like LA Knight, which we talked about when it happened, as something they got right, and then they paid it off. There was lots of that. Now what we've got. So you get Gunther that comes to a certain level, and now he's rolled down the card in that role.
Yep.
Jey Uso wins the Rumble. You can argue whether it was right or not. He's not in that role. You know, you've got Rhea Ripley, probably their biggest female star in the absence of Becky Lynch. What are we doing? We're kind of near enough teasing her going heel because we've messed up this freeway program. Because what we're doing, we're not doing heel face anymore like we were doing when they got hot, when you had your clear baby faces, your Cody Rhodes, your Sami Zayns, you know. No, we're mixing it up and we've got baby face, baby face, baby face. Nobody gets out of that without being hurt in some way. And especially when you've got a guy like CM Punk who goes out, you know, in Glasgow and starts baby facing himself because the other guys aren't there, which is funny enough something he got very angry with Adam Page about in Baltimore. But there we are. Funny how that works. But everybody gets hurt in these builds. Rhea Ripley is getting hurt in this build. Yeah. You know, you are taking all these things that got you hot, that got you to this kind of boom period, the successful period, and you're stamping on every single one of them. And all these little things you think don't matter, but they do. And these are the things that will kind of sit in the back of people's minds while you're burning things. You know, Roman Reigns' babyface return. Have they got everything they should have got out of that? Is it as big as it should be? That should have been the thing. So once he lost to Cody, you know, that babyface run was their next bit of real energy to invoke into this. You know, you had a babyface Roman Reigns coming back after years of people not wanting a babyface Roman Reigns and then going heel. That should have been easy money. And it hasn't been. Why? Why has that not gone wrong?
He's not there. He's never there, Trish. I mean, that's part of the thing with Roman. Like, how often is he actually on the shows? And I think it leads to a thing we talk about with AEW all the time, where it's like, and you sometimes have to wonder about, like, the competition between AEW and WWE is overall a positive. But you have to see that there's sometimes, I think, negative sides to this with regards to contracts and who you want to retain. In the fact that I think there are guys that these companies don't want to let go, because they're afraid of the impact of like a Cody Rhodes jumping or a Ricochet jumping, say. But in the reality, by keeping them, they're hurting themselves because they have to keep these guys who are sort of stale and maybe not where they need to be in the main event, where they maybe need to move them out of the way and get some fresher guys up the card, right? I'm probably jumping ahead of where I need to be, but...
I don't know if that is with Roman, though. Like, a Roman big babyface run should have been... Roman. It's like having a... we've never had an AEW Kenny Omega babyface run. Right. Very similar kind of concept. Like, this should have been an easy kind of knockout punch. It should have been so easy to kind of make this, but they had nowhere for him to go. They didn't have the heels for him to go to. They didn't have everything set up. And that's because you've now got this thing where everything at the top is static. So, it's what we've talked about where AEW was, and it's what we're talking about with WWE now. And that means someone like Drew McIntyre can carry a feud through the whole of a year, put in some of the best work of anybody last year in that company, and now is literally way lower down the card than he was. And then, Cena's going to get the belt of the heel, and that then kneecaps you for the rest of the year. Like, there's nowhere for these guys to go now because the top's static. And they're stuck. And now they're going to pay off kind of things from the past. And it's going to revolve around all these people that have come back in, whether it's Punk or Rock or whoever. And these are the people that's, and and Ronda Rousey that's potentially training as well, who knows where she ends up. Probably put my money down that it might be here. But it's like all these names come back in. This is always what happens when they get success and they get into this period. Everyone else wants a kind of a chunk of the pie. Everybody else comes back in. But all these things that got you successful, which mainly is about people being elevated upwards and people know how to follow the journey and kind of, getting excited about new faces in these positions. It all stops.
It's a good point. I think, I was going to say, I think the other thing that I was kind of struck by with this Punk Reign stuff was when he made the comment to the audience of like, I'm so grateful to you, the audience, because you cheered for me for 10 years. And I was like, he's still doing this 4 years later? Like, I think that part also kills me. Like, the guy has nothing new or interesting to do when it comes to these feuds. It's like all callbacks to shit that happened already, which, I guess if you're into it. But I think that touches on something else. A lot of that shoot shit is working its way into the WWE programming that they avoided during that hot period for them.
Yeah, it's bled in. It's like a drain. It's like a blood drain. It drains your company of all the good about it ever so slowly, so people don't notice it, or they think it's great because it's interpersonal, but they forget that you're actually using the wrong dynamics for that. Because as soon as you start telling, it's the same with the Rock stuff, as soon as you start telling people that none of this is real, then everything kind of falls to pieces, because then you just start judging who's real and who's not. And that's always a really low down point to start any story. And yeah, it's bled in, and now it's all across the board. And now even Triple H is out there saying, we don't have to keep kayfabe on everything. And it's just like, it's a dangerous path. And he won't hit them straight away.
No.
But I do not believe that this thing that they can stay hot forever in terms of actual kind of business. Look, they can keep picking up site fees. I've seen the thing with Orlando this week trying to get, 18 million to put into...
They want a Mania, a Rumble, a SummerSlam.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to get that because they can still prove that they have their shows as destination shows. They could do that even when they're in their down period. People still went to WrestleMania in 2019 and 2020. Yeah, 2019. My God, I'm losing time. That still happens. You're still not kind of gonna. That's not going to stop. But all the kind of interest in between, all the things that drive that, all the kind of measures where you can choose and look at popularity, all of them will begin to suffer. And you can say, we've never seen it with UFC. Well, UFC's pay-per-view buys man out here and complains about. So you do see it. So as a business, will it affect them massively? Probably not. In terms of popularity, absolutely it could. Because we can see that we're at the down part of this, the starting to kind of the tail of this cycle now. And, we're throwing the older stuff at it. We're throwing this Cena retirement run at it. We're throwing Punk's kind of main event WrestleMania stuff at it. What has he got after that? Oh, he's going to challenge for the title? Maybe he'll win the secondary belt? Oh, great. It doesn't mean anything, does it? What's his purpose then? He doesn't have a purpose. What have we done with Roman's babyface run? Nothing. We've burnt that out. What have you got coming up that's going to fulfill these roles? Who have you got coming up that's going to fulfill these roles? Who are you going to be able to take over these things? Are you going to just churn the same names and the same names? Well, it didn't work for WCW, it didn't work for WWF, it's not going to work for anybody. You know, there's always a time on top. That's where it's different from kind of things like UFC or other things like that. That's how wrestling works differently and why we should judge it differently. But it's coming to... You need to start changing these things over. You need to have these kind of tough conversations. And what this card demonstrates is they're not capable of doing that at the moment.
Which is interesting because usually it's AEW that gets shit on for not being willing to have tough conversations. This Mania, like you said, just sort of like screams, you know, satisfying people backstage rather than fulfilling an actual creative thought.
And they've still got to sell tickets for it. You know,
which they're not.
You know, they're a long way behind where they were last year. And, you know, they've got a third of the stadium still to go. And, you know, will they drop the prices massively across the board? We'll see. But Vegas is not an attractive place to go at the moment in general.
No.
You know, it's not a cheap place to go at the moment in general either. You know, are you going to end up comping like you did in Orlando, you know, back in the mid-2000s to kind of get people through the door? We'll see. But I think there's more questions than kind of anything else at the moment. And when you see kind of places like What Culture come out and kind of criticise it, who've never criticised their Build It feels, that kind of says that the fox is in within the hens at the moment. So
yeah, I was going to say, it feels like there's certainly a lot more people talking about how unsatisfactory this WrestleMania build has been than you've seen since the, you know, Triple H era began. And since Vince left, where people are like, this isn't good, blah, blah. And then people are like, well, it was never good, so it's okay. And I think that's, to be fair, I do think that's kind of, it's a little bit like the post-Hangman, you know, winning the belt moment, where it's like, we did this phenomenal story, what's next? You know,
yeah, it's very similar to 2022 AEW.
Yeah. It's kind of funny how, like, I mean, you know that it's cyclical, and you can say that it's cyclical, but then to see it, you know, happening in real time is always sort of fascinating, because it does feel like WWE is making a lot of the same mistakes that AEW made in 2022.
It's the same mistakes that everybody's made at some point, because you get all those egos in kind of one space, and you know, everyone's part of that success, and then everyone thinks that they're the answer to solving it after. So when it starts to decline. So we did get a couple of questions just in related to this. So one of the big spark points of the triple threat with Seth, Roman, and Punk getting the night one, quote unquote, main event was that it meant that this was another year with no women's main event on WrestleMania.
Yep.
And Matt asked if we could talk about a post that Lyric made on Twitter. I'm not saying X. I've written X too much last week. It's awful. And she said, the talent pool of North American women's wrestling is better than it has ever been. Over the next few years and months, as stadium and pay-per-view cards begin to take shape, you will hear every excuse in the book as to why women can't be the centre stage in just about every company. Oh boy. So last time around, we talked about Toni Storm and Mariah May, which should have been the main event of Revolution and wasn't. And everyone gave us all the excuses except any that were actually kind of justifications. And very similar with what happens here in WWE. So there is nothing that says that has to be a main event on any night. As much as I don't think it's worth as much as anyone would say so. But there isn't even an opportunity for the women to make their case or to be put in the places where they're promoted strongly to kind of earn that opportunity. So, you know, Triple H says you've got to earn the spot. They don't have the opportunity to earn the spot. And I think that is the thing that goes across wrestling at the moment. So what we have is, and I think Evolution being announced just before WrestleMania when people were talking about this is like,
Yep.
is the timing they want. So what we've got is we've got a lot of kind of egos at the top, and we've got these static tops at the top of most companies, right? Especially in America. So in AEW and WWE. And what this has led to is we've actually regressed back from where we were. So if you look at 2019, when Becky Lynch was the biggest star in wrestling, actually the biggest star in wrestling, right? And main events WrestleMania was Charlotte Flair and Ronda Rousey. Rousey, a legit star coming in from UFC. Charlotte always their kind of golden child in WWE. But it was like, it felt like the main event coming out of the Rumble, and it was the main event, and she's the biggest star. And since then, what we've done is we've had this kind of pushback, and we've had this regression. So now what we do is that we celebrate the tiniest little things that we declare as wins, as though we're seeing progress, because people so desperately want progress. They want this equality. They want this idea that we're seeing in lots of other places, that, people are starting to understand that the women can get the same results as the men. I thought WWE had learned something from this from NXT, because when they were the most successful against AEW was when they focused on their female talent. Bianca Belair could beat a Dynamite main event with a Chris Jericho or a John Moxley. Rhea Ripley did well. You had anybody that came down there. When you look at taking out the kind of factors of where you're put on Raw or SmackDown or whatever, when everyone went to NXT, there wasn't The Rock or Punk or Seth Rollins that did the best. It was Becky Lynch, Right. So when you take out these other factors, you should be able to see that. And Becky Lynch is sat at home with nothing to do. Would that have happened to John Cena in this WrestleMania season? Would it have happened to The Rock? Would it have happened to CM Punk? Would it have happened to Roman Reigns? Would it have happened to Seth Rollins? No, of course it wouldn't. But we don't have anything strong enough for her in a strong enough position, so she sat at home. That wouldn't happen. And then what we're going to do, so we're going to put the women and give them a main event on their own show that we booked in a venue that people thought was booked for NXT because of the size of it. So you're already giving off a perception. And we're going to say that that is the same as not positioning them highly at WrestleMania. Do you know, I'm going to give you a really bad example, okay? This is an awful example. But in Japan, there are women-only train carriages because there's an issue. And rather than actually sorting out the issue or addressing the issue so we can have equality and everybody's treated the same, we have women's-only carriages. And that's exactly what evolution is. And that doesn't mean you can't celebrate women or celebrate any other, celebrate men. You celebrate whoever you want. But you're doing this to offset the fact that you are unable to place women in the same way that you are men for no other reason that they are men and they are women. Stephanie McCook can open and close in NXT and do the same ratings as the men on that show.
Yep.
Becky Lynch can pick up the same, ratings as anyone else on Raw practically. Did they get the 9 p.m. slot? 9 p.m. slot was the big slot on Raw, by the way. It wasn't the main event. 9 p.m. was the key slot. How many times have women main evented and been protected, the ab rate protection that everybody else got in that 9 p.m. slot, over the last 2 years? It's not many. You look at Dynamite. I feel so bad because I see so many posts and it's like, oh, they've main evented this show, they main evented that show. And it's like, how many times have they opened a show?
Yeah.
How many times have they opened Dynamite? Because that's the key slot in terms of ratings that they look at most of the time. The other's the crossover slot, and kind of a lot of the moment going into Q6. I think they found something there that they think going into Q6 gives them something. But it's the opening. Until last year, until I think the first week Mercedes was there, that was the first time women's segment had ever opened AEW Dynamite.
Yeah.
What we're doing is accepting these tiny things, these kind of little tokens or these gestures, and saying that this is all that we require. That's not equality. You don't think Toni Storm is capable of opening the Dynamite from a ratings perspective? Is she more capable or less capable than a Will Ospreay or Swerve Strickland? I don't think there's any difference. In fact, she might be stronger than both of them. Yeah. No disrespect to anybody. But because you build up. Was MJF when he was first put in them positions? Was Adam Page when he was put in them positions? None of them were. You have to put them in them positions for them to draw. And they're not given the same opportunity. And what we do is we give them part of that opportunity, and then we claim that they're given the same opportunity and that we can kind of make it some huge congratulations and self-pat on the back on how far everything's coming. And yet it's still the same. It's just little token offerings. And I find it so frustrating because there's all this talk about how much they value people and how much they do this, but they don't get. They can get the same or sometimes greater results, and they never get positioned the same. And they don't get the same opportunities, and it's because we're still stuck with the same kind of rhetoric, the same structure in wrestling, the same viewpoints. And this is echoed, so I'm going on a bit of a rant here, but it's because of everything else as well. I was actually talking to Lyric last week, which you'll find out why soon enough. And and she pointed out to me that if you look at someone like Sports Illustrated, they've just increased their wrestling coverage. No female commentators. If you look at written coverage at The Observer, there's nobody, No. And if you look at Bleacher Report, I'm sure if you look at ESPN, we could go across the board here, and I think you would struggle to find female voices that can facilitate kind of these issues at all. You won't find them. You might find them outside of the big media, but you're not finding them close enough to anybody that's going to be able to make an active change. And it's the same way with the viewpoints. You'll listen to people how they talk about wrestling, and as soon as they hear kind of women talk about or interpret wrestling differently, or anybody interpret wrestling differently, it gets closed down because you have the same voices repeating the same things. So we don't have that diversity in the voices, and therefore it doesn't mean anything to them in terms of enforcing any change in what we see diversity on screen in that regard. So we do see little things, we see kind of little improvements, but it's not enough. And that's not to celebrate what things that have changed over the last 20 years. We've gone from women not being able to throw punches on WWE television to what we have now. We've gone from, I remember Trish and Lita main eventing in 2003 and it being treated as this huge, massive thing. And, then going back to where they were previously. It's like, there is progress, but you can't accept where we are now. You can't. And, or just kind of pat everybody on the back from it, because actually what you're doing is stopping any actual progress being made by just accepting kind of the tokens on offer.
Well, it's also, like you said, it's regressive in terms of like there was, for all that you could have a lot of criticisms of WWE, there were times where their women's division was significantly better than AEW's women's division, and even in the Vince years. And that has not been the case for a little bit of time, I think. They're certainly not pushed the way they were at one point. And I think the AEW women's division has gotten significantly better, but it's hard to say that it could, but that's not like, it couldn't have been worse, right? For how long did we have like the women's title holder and whoever her challenger was and nothing else that happened in the division? And then we had the women's title holder and whoever her challenger was and Jade Cargill and whoever her challenger was and nothing else in the division. And now it seems like there's at least some desire and need for people to get, for women to get more time and for there to be more storylines and more happening, which is great, but they're still not given enough time. And you're not seeing them doing things like main eventing Revolution when they were the clear and obvious choice, Tony and Mariah, to main event. And if they had been men, it wouldn't have even been a second guess of a question.
It's a ceiling. It's a ceiling.
Right,
so
right.
It's like, they can main event and they can do massive things on NXT. They can do things on Collision. They can have the third kind of slot on Dynamite.
Right.
But that's it. It's a ceiling, and that's what we're not breaking. That's where we're regressing. So we thought when we got the Becky Lynch main event, and the spots that she was putting in, that we'd finally get this follow-up, and we'd see all these other people come through. And we have huge depth now in a way that we didn't even have 3-4 years ago. And it feels like we get less in total across the board. And and you see all these decisions being made where it seems to just go back to, well, these guys are the draw. And it's
they're the draw. They're the draw because you've given them the opportunity to be the draw. Like you said, because you put them in the spots where they got the time, because you gave MJF 9 p.m. every night for fucking a year and a half, right? Mm-hmm. Because you let Orange Cassidy or John Moxley or Kenny Omega open every Dynamite, right? That's why those guys got to but that's why Orange Cassidy got to be where he is, because he opened every fucking Dynamite for practically 6 months, right? That's part of why he was so over towards the end of that international championship reign. Like, not just his abilities, not just like the storyline, but also because you put him in the spot to be successful. And if you're not going to put the women in the spots to be successful, then that's the frustrating part. Like, every time they give the women a bar to clear and then they clear it, right? And then it's like, well, that's fine, but like, we're not going to let you get the reward that we would give you if you were a dude.
Yeah, and it's I think Mercedes talked about it quite recently on an interview,
Right.
and kind of explained that exact fact. And, it's the same with the depth as well. So in WWE, you'll have the main titles for the women they get on every other pay-per-view. But, Cody's going to be on practically each single one, Roman's going to be practically on each single one. The mid-card belts, don't even see a pay-per-view. Mid-card male belts, they will do. And it's like, the longer that this continues, the more damage that you're doing, because you are behind a lot of areas in society. And there is some pushback. We see it with women's sports a lot as well. There is some pushback at the moment where you're seeing this rapid acceleration of numerous kind of women's sports across globally. Looking at, women's basketball in the US, or,
Yep.
Football in a number of other places, that you're getting this pushback. But that's where you kind of have to push forward. And we're not seeing that. And I think there's this run of things now, and they're going to gloss over it, and they're going to pretend that this doesn't even exist, or it doesn't matter because, we're running Evolution and that solves everything. But as soon as you start putting women essentially in a box because you don't want to change the reality of your kind of your everyday, of your top line, then you are not succeeding. You are not changing anything. You are not, pushing culture or adapting or doing anything. All you're doing is trying to maintain a status quo and get your kind of pat on the backs at the same time.
Right. We want women to be successful, but we don't want them to be so successful that my spot's in danger. I still gotta keep my spot,
Yeah.
And it's a competitive business, and I get it, but like, Jesus fucking Christ, get over it.
Matt also asked us another question, talking of some of the women. This was on Toni Storm in AEW. And he said, we're on the cusp of Toni really feeling like a breakthrough homemade star, and all anyone seems to want to do is have Megan Bayne beat her. It's exactly what you dream of when you create a character, and you don't stop now, you make her a legend. You stamp her as a signature part of your company, not just use her to put someone over before you've finished the job. What do you think of that statement?
I think that it's very wrestling, and it's very like internet wrestling community to have someone win the belt and do an amazing job and then immediately be like, they got to put somebody over, right? Like, who's she going to put over? Like, I appreciate that there are a lot of people that see amazing things in Megan Bayne. And I am not going to accuse them of being men who are seeing, her physical attributes. Fine. I don't see what they see in Megan Bayne. Like, she's fine. Like, I think she's good. Like, but I haven't seen enough of Megan Bayne to be like, oh my God, she's this incredible character that like, I'm so struck with her that like, she absolutely has to beat Toni. I feel like it's a situation where it's like, if you have a plan for something that you want to do and you're 100% that Megan Bayne is going to be like your next big fucking star, then fine. But like, I don't see any realm in which Megan Bayne is going to clear Toni Storm as a worker or as a performer. So I'm kind of confused as to why we're in a rush to make her and have at the expense of Toni Storm. I kind of agree with Matt that I think they should be continuing to push Toni. I was happy to see Toni come out and open Collision last night. I thought she had a great promo. I thought the stuff they're doing with the feud itself is great. I think the fact that they've been focusing on tags helps because it does get Penelope in there. It does get Thunder Rosa in there. Even though I'm not exactly the biggest Thunder Rosa fan either. But like at the end of the day, they're doing something a little bit different with Toni, right? Like it's been a one-on-one with her and Mariah, and now we're going to like expand the universe a little bit. I love it, and who's got a complaint about Thunder Tits? I mean, come on. It's the greatest fucking thing I've ever heard of. Like, Jesus Christ. But like, I don't know what this is a very specific wrestling thing. Like wrestling fans, and they just want a giant monster to come in and beat everybody, and it's not like, I don't know. I think it's a bad idea. What do you think, Trish?
If this was, I don't know. Okay, who am I going to pick on? No. No, look, I think Matt's right, because Tony is just really getting into her stride on her best work for me. You know, the promos since Revolution may have outdone the ones before Revolution. You know, she's absolutely in control of her character. And yeah, you want to make her a figurehead. You want to make her, you know, a kind of a focus point of your promotion. You don't do that now by beating her after a month. I don't care who you're trying to put over. You wouldn't do that with anybody else. Could you imagine if you did that with Max? Like, it wouldn't happen. So Megan Bayne gets the rubber. Oh, she beats Toni Storm, right? Okay. Well, with Toni Storm now, yeah, you do need to finish the job. You need to maximize it. You don't just cut it off straight away after you've kind of reached that point where it's not just where she won kind of last year and it's kind of like everyone's excited that Tony's champion, but it needed this story to kind of elevate them upwards. Now you're at the point where she's seen as a star. I don't think she was seen as a star at that point last year.
No, I agree with you. I don't know that there were, I mean, with the exception of Britt Baker, I don't know that AEW has presented a woman as the star at this level.
No, not until Mercedes came in.
Right.
But definitely not since Britt in terms of someone that has kind of gotten hot. Yeah, they made, you know, who got hot in their company. So this is the first time. So no, don't cut somebody off just when they've reached that point. You know, you wouldn't do it with a John Boxer, you wouldn't do it with an MJF, so don't do it with Toni Storm. You know, give her that run. Megan Bayne is built up as a really great, credible kind of first challenger for this run.
Yes.
You've got her up to a point where people see her as a threat or as a, you know, a legitimate kind of, you know, person on that roster to always kind of be in that position. That's more than enough that you've achieved in this. You know, like chucking the belt on her where's she going to be? She's not going to be positioned like Tony is because Tony is now Tony Khan now trusts Toni Storm in some manner to be in bigger positions. You know, other than Tony and Mercedes, nobody else is going to get those spots. It doesn't happen because you have to get round that he doesn't, you know, see always putting women in the top spots as a sound investment before Mercedes came in. You know, he will only do it once it kind of pays off. That's kind of been what we're talking about with opportunity. So why would I put the belt on Megan Bayne, who's then going to be relegated, let's be honest, down to lesser spots with probably lesser screen time, then keep it on Tony's promo time. Yeah, she's backstage segments is a good idea for Megan Bayne. But you're not going to get the same results. It's not going to kind of make anything. It's like Thunder Rosa beating Britt Baker in the end, you know? Yeah. Because he had no investment in terms of the same level of investment, you're not going to get the same results. So absolutely not. Like, and you could see that sometimes with Mariah May's run. You know, before Tony came back, it was like a different level of positioning. So actually, for now, for where we are, the biggest thing is to kind of solidify Toni Storm as your kind of, you know, second, not homegrown, but homemade female star. And have that second person other than Mercedes that you can then revolve your biggest programs around. And that is it for me. I don't see any point in doing anything else with that. And, you know, and when you do get to that point, when you have got somebody that gets hot or you've been able to invest in someone else to come up to her, or whether you want to do the, you know, the big match, the kind of Mercedes-Tony match, whatever that is, you do that at the biggest possible stage the same way that you would with kind of anybody else. You know, you don't do it on what's essentially a B-level pay-per-view 4 weeks after she's won the belt. You know, that's 8 weeks after she won the belt, 4 weeks after that feud ended with Mariah May. That's like, it's not the right time. You don't cut her legs off now. You know, so let her go, let her carry on with these, you know, with the incredible work that she's doing at the moment. See who else that you can elevate in the meantime just by working with her, because that's where she's up to now. You know, people can be elevated by being in programs with her, and especially because, you know, she's getting the mic time, she's getting time with them out inside of the crowd. All those sort of things that the women particularly were struggling with prior to Mercedes arriving, and if you weren't working with Britt Baker. So that's what's important at the moment for them, and, you know, positioning of that division as a whole. And I thought they did a good job of finally getting some Owen names announced last night. It needed to happen because, you know, you can't have men declaring and then the women kind of saying nothing. Again, it's that perception thing. So they finally got that kind of up and running, and a big focus on that. And then you've got to work out how you're going to split those matches and who's going to get the bigger kind of part in that. But it's like, it's that equality thing again. So, but yeah, keep it on Tony, leave her be, let her talk about Thunder Tits or whatever else she wants to talk about. We've kind of transcended into AEW through Matt's questions there. So I think I'm going to skip to the questions right at the bottom before we get to Rambones' question.
Yep.
So we'll start at the top line. So Dynasty. I think there's a funny perception because I think they've made it very clear that they have B-level pay-per-views now. And I think as soon as you start doing I point at the sign and making a tentpole show, you kind of not downplace the ones before it, but you do definitely kind of put them at lesser importance.
Yeah.
And this very much is kind of, and I know they're going to probably throw some Owen matches on it that will look good on paper, but maybe not have the emotional resonance of what definitely what you've had coming into Revolution. Right. But it's like, so you've definitely got what feels like a B pay-per-view outside of the main event occurring. And the short turnaround, I don't know if that's helped that. But the one thing that maybe feels exceptional to that at the moment is in terms of how big the match feels, maybe not completely in the build, is Swerve and Jon Moxley. So Sarah, how do you feel about this matchup at this point and Dynasty in general?
So I thought that I thought that Swerve and Mox's segment on Wednesday was probably the best Mox has looked in a while. Maybe since he murdered Chuck Taylor. I thought that, Swerve is so much more interesting to me. And again, I get that it's like people's personal preferences, but what Swerve is doing with regard to the way he's talking about Mox and the way he's engaging with Mox and like the edginess to him on Wednesday and like, to the point where I'm like, is this the start of a heel turn? Like there was something about it that I was like, this is great. And then I got mad that it was going to be 2 weeks. And, we had to sit through 3 fucking months of fucking Adam Copeland. My resolution for this week was that I wasn't going to curse as much because I was like, you curse too much. You have to cut back on your language. And now, like, look what's happened. Fucking Edge makes me fucking pissed. But, like, that's kind of it, right? Like, we had to sit through 3 months of this shitty build, and like Swerve can come in and in one promo, he's already more interesting than anything we saw in that 3 months, right? Like, I want Swerve to win the belt. I want Swerve to win the belt because they give the title holder a shit ton of time, or at least they did, right? Theoretically, they do. And I think that what Swerve is doing is way more interesting and something I want to see on my TV than anything I've seen from Moxley again, since he murdered See Above Reach, Chuck Taylor. So, like, that's kind of where I'm at with this. For the rest of the build to this, like, Kenny's match with Ricochet, like, I kind of wish that Speedball wasn't involved in it because I feel like Kenny versus Ricochet by itself would be interesting, but, fine, I guess. Mariah versus Megan Bayne, fine. I'm sure it'll be good, and the build so far has been interesting to me. I'm struggling to even remember what the rest of the fucking card is. This is, which is not a great indictment for how I feel about this. Oh, it's fucking FTR. See, the cursing again. FTR Copeland. Versus, verse for the trios title. And, Adam Cole and Daniel Garcia again for the TNT title. Yeah. I'm not, this is not lighting my loins on fire, I guess is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the card, it's a functional card in the most part, and it's probably going to be sold off its main event, truly, in a way that Revolution had something major for everybody. It was a complete different kind of collaboration of things. This is very much, you're probably going to decide off that main event or not, or if you like one of the Owen matches as just a match, But it's kind of... Oh, we left out Hurt Syndicate and Big Bill and Brian Keith, but maybe that's good because...
We're going to talk about that in a minute. Okay. Or at least I am because...
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. This pay-per-view Dynasty, almost as much as the World's End to me, feels pointless. Like when you know, like Wrestle Dream, at least stuff has happened, right? Like this pay-per-view is so soon after Revolution. It's so quickly before Double or Nothing. Like, why is it there? Why do we need this? This could go away in my mind.
Yeah, it does feel like the wrong time because you've not had that many things to develop.
No.
You've had so many things that felt like kind of final at Revolution, you know. And you think about Revolution, like everybody talks about Revolution. They don't talk about All In. Now everybody's talking about All In. And Double or Nothing will maybe get away with it in the same way that World's End does because World's End has the C2 finals, or this is going to have the Owen, right? And the Owen's going to mean more than it did, you know, in when they ran it at Double or Nothing in 2022. So, okay, I understand that. But it's like, it doesn't have the name value of the kind of traditional pay-per-views do. And there doesn't feel like, that. A lot of the card feels TV level. And I can't get away from that at the current time. And it's kind of, I don't know, there's nothing that makes me, outside the main event, really want to see what happens. You know, and it feels very old as well, I'm going to be honest. The card, as it currently stands, feels very old. You know,
well, it's also like you could predict pretty much every winner so far, for the most part.
Yeah, so
which doesn't help.
It's one of those things. But when it comes to the main, I thought one of the lines on Swerve's promo was when he told Mox he could go back to playing John Moxley, which is a line that John Moxley uses Dean Ambrose to John Cena. And I thought it was very funny. I was just like, have you been listening? Because, you know, we always talk about Mox does have some Cena-like tendencies at times. He picks up some of his worst habits at times. And I thought that was quite funny that he brought that up. And it was kind of adequate because, you know, we've made that comparison that one of the biggest problems is that Mox has kind of lost his authenticity. Yes. You know, this character doesn't have any authenticity, and whether you think that's the aim of the character or not, it doesn't feel like John Moxley. It definitely feels like a character, but I still don't quite get what we're doing here, right? So we've put Swerve Strickland in this position where he gets 2 weeks of the actual focus being on him going into the main event. You know, 2 weeks was on Adam Copeland's rematch with John Moxley. 2 weeks after doing 3 months of giving Copeland the big kind of second tentpole of the year pay-per-view. We're going to do this on 4 weeks, but 2 weeks actual focus build. And then what are we going to do? Are we going to do some kind of screwball finish and then Swerve just kind of gets out of the way? You know, are you going to do your kind of run-ins and everything like that? Like, if you were going to beat him in that way, then surely it at least needs to go to Double or Nothing. You know, this happening where it is and the Owen being announced on Wednesday takes Swerve out the Owen, so then you're running kind of more pressure being on a title change. And then it's like, oh, are you just going to have him beat Swerve Strickland? Does it feel like that's the right time to do that? Does he feel like a strong enough character? You know, the guy that could barely escape Adam Copeland is just going to beat Swerve Strickland. It doesn't feel right to me. I don't understand why he's in this spot unless you're doing the change, and I don't feel like they are. And I even more so don't understand why they're teasing Swerve and Hangman for All In, you know, and bringing them together, because you didn't have to do that. Like, I can understand that if they keep this belt on Moxley and then they immediately infer that they're not going to a rematch with Swerve Strickland, I can understand there being anger because of the frustration with this story, even though some people seem to feel like the nail spot solves everything. Like, there's so many issues with it that you want to see it kind of switch because you want AEW to kind of take advantage of the mistakes that WWE are making, not make similar ones.
Yes!
So you're not feeling like the same, right? So there's going to be anger in that way and in that aspect, and it'd be the third time that Moxie's put down Swerve, and you're thinking, well, we need to start seeing some progression now, you know, we need to start seeing this movement. But also it's like we're going to tease Swerve and Hangman and then not deliver it. Like, why would you do that? Why would you do that in this time period? Why would you even put them together? I actually thought they'd kind of figured it out when they had Ospreay start going out and do interviews about, like, you know, I want the world title match at All In, I want to get the ball and that sort of thing. And I thought, okay. And then you're going to keep them away from it, right? Because the last thing that you do is, like, make it like the generation game and be like, oh, here's what you could have won that was still on the, you know, thing going around on the Travelator. Like, you don't give them a hint. You don't say, actually, you could have this thing that you tell everyone that, that you really, really want, but we maybe don't value it as much as you do, but we are going to use it because we find it useful. Like, you don't do that. Like, why would you? One, they put out the trailers and stuff was for the Hangman, that's one thing. But two, as soon as you start making that an on-screen angle, you are teasing your audience. You are telling your audience this could be a thing. Why would you then pull the rug for a second year in a row? Like, why would you even tease that? Why would you just not keep him out the fucking way? You could have kept Hangman away with MJF. You didn't have to have Swerve interact with Moxley at all. In fact, he wasn't supposed to originally. You made this change. You are doing this to yourselves. Are you really not going to deliver and think that you're not going to get any sort of backlash or whatever? Do you not care? Is it just, we'll make it even worse? It's like, we'll beat Strickland here, and then there won't be anything after the following, and then Page will go back to his gatekeeper role and put over Will Ospreay. Because the cynic part of me looks at it and thinks, do I really see him going with Swerve and Hangman at All In? Because as much as here's something that's truly authentic AEW, here's something that's not a copycat of 2018 WWE like John Moxley's doing at the moment, or Edge and Christian WWE reunion that we're going to get on that show, or Kenny Omega and Okada New Japan throwback. This is something that is AEW, and we're really going to kind of not run with it.
See, this is where the cynical part of me says they are going to run with it. It's just not going to be for the title, and it'll be in the middle of the show. And it's a way to sell tickets. It'll be a way to sell tickets because it's like, well, you can have this, right? Swerve will put over Moxley, Hangman will put over Ospreay, and then they'll go be in like a middle of a thing. And it's like, okay, the people who were excited for those programs, you can have that, but it's not going to be at the top of the card, and that's fine. For me, I think I personally see Swerve losing to Mox as a much bigger booking mistake or booking, and again, who knows? I'm not going to get pre-mad about something that might change or whatever, but like, I just see that as being a bigger issue than having Hangman beat or Ospreay beat Hangman, right? Like, I'm not happy about that either, but whatever, it's fine. Like, it'll be a great match. That could be an interesting program. Like, the guy, like, if this is what we see for Hangman, I'm just happy he's on TV at this point. Like, let's be honest.
Yeah, but look, that's the thing, isn't it? So he comes out of Revolution, and you're like, yeah, are they going to push this guy? And he's like, no, he's back to 2-minute segments. No, he's not with MJF behind. He doesn't see a crowd. Like, does there any part of me that ever believes they're going to push him over Will Ospreay, who's their next, like, the way they view him as like their next MJF? Like,
no, absolutely not.
Don't be stupid.
Absolutely not. We get Ospreay returns. Like, come on.
Yeah, like come on now.
Which fine. Like, I'm excited for it. Like, I'd like the guy to give more promos about how Kenny Omega's broken his heart. But I just think that I watched that promo from Wednesday, and the crowd went fucking insane for Swerve. And Swerve gave his promo, and he did such an incredible job with it. And he said, "Whose house?" And the crowd screamed Swerve's house. And this is one of your fucking hottest guys. This is a top card guy, and you're going to feed him to Jon Moxley? I don't get it. I just don't get it. I don't. I feel like if you were going to do that, then there's a fucking dozen mid-card guys that you could feed to Moxley, right? Like, put fucking Mark Briscoe there then. Like, something. Like, this just makes no sense to me and seems, like you said, such a senseless waste at a moment where WWE is fucking up like crazy, okay? And pissing people off, and you have an opportunity. So let's take this super hot guy and let Mox, who everybody has been bored of his reign since the week after he murdered Chuck Taylor, and they want him to be gone, and we're just going to have him. Like, this, I'm so confused by this. And I'm willing to be, like, as always, willing to be wrong, willing to be led somewhere new and different and exciting, but, like, all of this so we can do Mox versus Darby or Mox versus Ospreay. I can't envision a program that I am less interested in than Mox versus Ospreay for the title. Like, there are people that Ospreay could beat for the title that I'd be like, let's go, I'm ready for this. But Mox versus Ospreay, I just can't see that being good at all.
I just don't think, I think, with first title ones, people look for kind of emotional resonance and something that's kind of where you really want something. And I don't think that's what you get there. But
no, especially not with Ospreay, who has never suffered for a second in AEW.
Oh,
God love him. Even when the Fletcher heartbreak was still like water off a fucking smooth brain where you're just like, none of this made any emotional resonance whatsoever.
He won't,
so like,
he's MJF. He's in the MJF slot, so he's never gonna suffer. You're never gonna feel that. It's not gonna happen. It's like, that's the spot he's in. But I don't know. I just think that they need to be really careful here. You need to get really careful with decision making. The funny thing is that you're teasing this other thing, and it's such an easy storyline to go with. Like, you could see easily the way they're setting this up, like Paige coming out, thinking about interfering, stopping, turning back. He did a turns back spot we spoke about since All Out. He turned, because the Death Riders attack Swerve, he takes the Death Riders out, and then whatever happens with Swerve, and all he has to do is he doesn't need to interfere in a match, he just needs to take the Death Riders out. Then you've got your babyface turn, then you've got, that kind of resolution to that part of that story, and then you can have Swerve kind of take the title. But then it eats at him that
of course
Paige played a role in it. It's so easy. It's
so fucking easy. Come on. It'd be so much more interesting than any. And that's the part that I think people get so confused about. I don't want Swerve and Hangman to be at the top of the card because they're my favorite wrestlers. Because quite honestly, they're not my favorite wrestlers. I want them to be at the top of the card because they're the most interesting thing that they've got going on right now. Because I'm fucking bored every Wednesday. Because I had to watch Mark Davis in another fucking singles match.
Oh, you're gonna piss off Gallup now. You've got Gallup going.
I love Mark Davis, but Jesus Christ, oh my God. That's why I want these motherfuckers in the main event, because it would actually be emotionally interesting.
It's the strongest story they have.
Right.
It's the most authentic AEW story they have, with people that were homemade in their company. You measure up the alternatives, and it seems an easy choice. However, we'll see. Promises are made, and things don't always work that way. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I think teasing it and kind of doing this, I don't see a huge benefit in. I think if you go the other way, I think you'll probably end up with more backlash than you think, and doing that right before WrestleMania, I just don't see the benefit in it. So, just get it right. Just get it right, really. But going with, I love this question. So we got a question from Rambone Slampig, from our Discord. Hello, Rambones. He said, hi, it's a question for the podcast. Apologies for how lengthy it is.
Never apologize for length, buddy.
Well, we've deteriorated now.
Tony Storm is a bad influence on me.
This is because it's about FTR, right? And you've sworn so much as you mentioned FTR. Okay. So I noticed the lame rated FTR segment got sandwiched in between a Swerve Hangman interaction and a Swerve in-ring with Moxley on Dynamite this week. Was this a conscious decision to use something popular that pops ratings to prop up something that does not? In a similar way, the world title and Death Rider storyline has been de-emphasized lately, going from main events and multiple segments to only one or two segments, usually mid-show. Is this a concrete sign that TK acknowledges it's not working? Do these two things taken together suggest there is a real chance of a pivot away from the rumoured Mox versus Darby main event to All In? If the concern is selling tickets, it would seem that having a main event featuring the hotter acts in the promotion would be a no-brainer, right? Well, we just discussed the last bit. Want to discuss the first bit?
So I actually enjoyed the F-rated FTR segment on Wednesday, but almost in a way because it was bad, but it was classically AEW bad. It wasn't bad in a way that I was the MVP stuff, which we'll talk about in a minute. It was just bad in a hard bite. It was so bad it was good, right? Dax is wearing his glasses, Cope is wearing the rated FTR shirt, and it's just the most, Tunnel Talk put it perfectly today, and I can't say it any better than this, but FTR are the most, and Cope is like this, they are the most tell, don't show wrestlers that have ever existed, where instead, Tony Schiavone actually says in this promo, not a lot of people know that you're super best friends. Like, yes, because you have never shown this relationship to us. And when Copeland was absolutely getting murdered by the Death Riders every week, FTR disappeared. And at no point did we mention this in any way in this promo sit down, right? It was not a plot point of this. Nothing came up. It was just, you didn't win. And it was like it's the most horribly telegraphed heel turn from Dax that anyone has ever seen. It's so bad that it's like good, right? And like, I'm excited that FTR are doing something, and I'm sure they're very proud of themselves and like this emotional work that they're trying to put in. Like, good for them for making an attempt. But like, I don't see how you can, like, they definitely downplayed and I don't want to say downcycled a lot of the Death Rider stuff. Like, they clearly saw that it wasn't working and they moved away from it. Like, they understood at some point that heat wasn't working, right? And like, do I want to see Cope on TV anytime soon, ever again, for any reason? No. But if I have to see him, this was an enjoyable 3 minutes, right? And I am sure that, like, despite the tease last night on Collision that Dax is going to turn on Cash, they're going to just turn together on Cope. And like, again, they how many years did FTR refuse to turn heel? And now they're going to turn heel so they can be a part of the Cope and Christian reunification angle, which is just like, fine, whatever. You want to rely on nostalgia, rely on nostalgia. I don't know. Did you enjoy this as much as I did, even in an ironic way?
No.
Oh my God.
Oh my. In answer to Rambones' question, I think that they sandwiched it in between the two segments to try and emphasize that they thought that this is a really important plot point for the upcoming pay-per-view. Maybe he thinks it's one of the top... No, seriously, I think he thinks it's one of his top selling points. Yeah, he thinks it's a huge point on this pay-per-view.
Nobody cares! Nobody cares about these guys. You didn't give them any TV time. You didn't develop these relationships, okay? You did nothing. You didn't do any backstage skits. Like, Matt fucking Jackson would have been all over his TikTok, okay? If he didn't have the TV time to develop something like this, he would have been doing shit all over his TikTok or social media or whatever. We didn't even get that level of bullshit from him. And FTR don't want to lose, so they're off TV while Edge is getting his ass kicked, right? So they don't have to get their asses kicked.
It was the best bit was, it's like, oh, we're gonna go for the tag team titles, and it's like, oh, we're not, and then we're gonna blame Copeland for like not being able to concentrate on things. Okay. My favorite, this is my big conspiracy theory, and this is not true whatsoever. But did Jay White escape the Copeland vortex by not being able to get to Omaha last week?
Oh no, a blizzard! Sorry guys, I can't be a side note to your shitty feud.
Because like he was...
That's politicking, brother.
Because he was set up to be part of that finish, surely, and
of course,
now we are where we are. So I'm like, if Jay White, if that missed flight saved you this, then you are the smartest motherfucker I've ever met in my life. Even if you really tried to get there, well done.
I just, like, that's where, like, Tony Khan loves statistics. Like, this is where I would like to just, like, let's search Tumblr for keywords rated FTR and see what the fuck comes up, okay? And let's search Tumblr for, like, any other, like, Swerve, Hangman, anybody else, right? And see what pops up. Let's even, like, do your Twitter likes, right? Like, what videos are getting your Twitter likes, Tony? Like, where's your engagement coming? It's not fucking coming from rated FTR's potential breakup, okay?
They can go on Collision and do stuff, and I'm fine.
Yeah, it's fine. Go to Collision. Be on Collision. Love that for you. Embrace it.
Oh, no.
I like Undisputed Kingdom now because they're on Collision, right? Like, they're on Collision. Oh, it's great. Like, I see them and I'm happy, right? Like, please, go to Collision. Do something great. Pretend to have a great tag match, okay? Do a half-an-hour masturbatory tag match that everybody can talk about how great it is, and then we can be like, oh, my God, they're the greatest tag team of all time. On Collision, okay? So we don't have to see it if we don't want to.
Oh, no. I am going to finish this question. I'm going to finish the fucking question.
I'm not answering. I'm Rambones. I'm so sorry, buddy. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I'm so sorry.
How am I supposed to? Right. Yeah. No, they've sandwiched it in. I think he thinks it's a key angle going into this pay-per-view, and you know they put it in the key time slot, which conveniently isn't at the end of the show where everyone seems to claim it as this week. But there we are. So yeah, I think that's what they've done. Do I think this is a sign of a major pivot? No, I think you can see, as Sarah said, you can see the heel turn for FTR kind of, and that the de-emphasizing the Death Riders. I think they realized that it all needed scaling back quite dramatically, and that they needed to change the feel of the show, and I think they've done that. And him, Moxley working with someone like Strickland is better for the show as a whole. Obviously, you just got to get that right.
God. You did a good job. I am sorry. I am like the child in class who is just distracting you.
Sarah, talk about the Hurt Syndicate.
Okay. I have like an internal countdown clock right now, I think, for how long we are at before Bobby Lashley turns into Miro Part 2 and ends up just fucking home because he won't do a job. I mean, this segment the other night, was the parts where I laughed through FDR. I was infuriated during this. Okay. You cannot, this is how many tag teams have we had the Hurt Syndicate and MVP specifically go out and fucking embarrass, right? We saw what happened with Private Party. MVP can barely walk across the ring and yet was beating up Private Party for almost the entirety of that match that they had as a trios, right? Embarrassing, right? We have, MJF come out. He's going to take advantage of the card that MVP gives him. Lashley and Shelton come out to big league him and send him to the back, right? Then we have Big Bill and Brian Keith. I was about to say Keith Lee, and that's not right. I knew there was a Keith in there, though. Brian Keith come out, and Brian Keith, it gets called a girl and a bitch repeatedly. Then Big Bill, who is doing his best to give a promo, and God knows Big Bill's not the best promo in the world, but he's making an absolute effort, gets talked over and embarrassed and made to look like an absolute fucking geek by a guy whose job is to talk. This is not what needs to be doing. There's no point here at which the Hurt Syndicate has tried to make anybody look better. All they have tried to do is they are big leaguing and big dicking these teams in a way that I am what are they gonna have a match with somebody that they actually have to go 50-50 with, right? Or they're gonna try to, what are they gonna do with Big Bill? You're gonna squash Big Bill and Brian Keith? No, AEW audiences don't want to see that. How is this helping the tag division, which was already at death's door, right? Now, I don't want to see any of my favorite tag teams face these guys because I know they're going to be embarrassed and made to look like shit, both in the ring and on the microphone. So this is not what I'm here for. I'm not enjoying this. I'm not enjoying this at all.
And the thing about it is that it wasn't like Big Bill couldn't have held himself with MVP. He wasn't given the opportunity to.
Yes.
He was cut off at every single moment and so he couldn't do anything. So that's where you're big leaguing. That's where you're kind of, you're punching down a little bit. And I think it's such an unhealthy mindset. We talk about John Cena, mentioned John Cena earlier. It was something that he used to do all the time. And it was fine, right? Because John Cena was over. No, it's not fucking fine, because how many people could have been stars did he undermine that never could? And maybe
it's exactly what Charlotte Flair did to Tiffany Stratton on...
It's exactly the same. Yeah, it's exactly the same as the Charlotte Flair, Tiffany Stratton thing, which is one of the fucking worst things I've seen all year. Tiffany Stratton, who Becky Lynch did absolutely everything she could to get over in NXT, that Tiffany Stratton. And whether you think she can succeed in a babyface role or not, you don't do that. You've basically just said that this whole match is worthless. That she has no worth. It was embarrassing. And then I don't want to see that on AEW either. I don't want to see anybody do it on AEW.
I'm not interested in it.
Yeah, we are now at a point where I don't want to see anybody wrestle them. I want to see, because all that's interested to them is how much they keep themselves over. But that's never been the ethos that's kind of been the most successful in AEW. In fact, that's always led to problems. It's always led to problems. And, the fact that Swerve got out of that kind of ecosystem very, very quickly should tell you all you need to know, really. But yeah, it's one of them, I put a time on how long is it before people actually start to notice properly what's going on here. And every single time it happens, more and more people start to wake up, but eventually it'll come to a point, just like it did with Miro, with everybody else, in that kind of, who come in with that sort of attitude, that it will come a time and you all will recognize it, and then it'll be like, oh fuck, because no one's going to speak to them and say, oh, you need to cut that out, you need to watch that. No one fucking does that. It doesn't happen. That's part of the biggest problem. So it's but he does need to cut it out. MVP needs to cut that shit down now, because all you're going to do is damage people on your own roster, and you're damaging baby faces. And we've got a whole run of heel champions at the moment. You want to be building baby faces up to chase them, not fucking damaging them. I thought that segment was a disgrace, to be honest. I think
it was awful.
Was it Dave that said, the Hurt business is not good business? And that's exactly what happened here. And you need to fix that up, because this cannot continue. You're just going to decimate so many acts on your own roster. And for what? What are you getting out of it that makes that worthwhile? Because I don't see it. As they were quite recent arrivals, we should probably talk about the new AEW arrivals and the people out. So we have coming in the door Mina Shirakawa, obviously, who was over for guest spots quite regularly last year, very much involved in the Tony Mariah story. She has, according to her interview with Tokyo Sports, already signed with AEW a few days before she did the press conference with Stardom. Her last Stardom date officially is the 2nd. She's working the Tam Nakano Homecoming show on the 6th, and then she will work the Stardom shows in Las Vegas. And that rumor kind of came about quite quickly, as though she'd already been signed, because she was pulled from any other independent dates around the Stardom shows in Vegas. Yep. So it kind of, as soon as that happened, I think they kind of had to say what was going on, that she'd already been signed. But she's going to be kind of a fantastic addition, I think. She has so much personality.
Live event charisma. She's fantastic. I'm really happy that they got her. I think she's, like you said, she's a great addition. She's not like anybody else they have back there. She is unique and different in her own way, and I am really excited to see what she does next. Like, she's just freaking great.
And it's probably the right time. She's been very, from my understanding, very in and out in Stardom over the last year with her commitments elsewhere and everything like that. But, it was kind of, it's not the worst time for her to move on, for Stardom and for Mina herself. And I mean, she's going to be moving to the US as well. So she's really kind of going all in on this. And she's such a talent, but she does have so much connection. And I think it's unusual to find people that come into AEW and have that kind of connection straight away. So I am excited to see what they do with her booking wise, and hopefully she can mix it up. She seems to be kind of, she wants another match with Mercedes, I think seems to be top priority for her. So that will be interesting. But we also got Kevin Knight, who was announced last night on Collision as signing. So, I was speaking to someone about him the other day who said from his time in Japan that he has an incredible mind. He's always thinking up kind of creative ideas for other people, not just himself. So he's not selfish in any way. He's always just trying to think about how everyone can move forward, and I think that's a great mindset to have. And he was always down for leaving New Japan after January 4th. So I read some stuff from some of the US kind of news stuff, and it's so weird because it never matches up. But in Japan, they were very much expecting that he was going after that point, and then it was just a case of where. And from I believe WWE was kind of the first expression of interest, and that was a bit of a Jay White situation, and and he's chosen to be with AEW. So good luck to him. He's a very talented young man. And I like, adding on to like Speedball and the possibility of Josh Alexander coming in, who, probably fits in a similar role to Speedball in terms of kind of mid-card, solid worker sort of aspect. I think I like the direction that these kind of signings have, as opposed to some of the other more recent waves of signings.
Yes. Yeah, it's more like mid-card, like younger guys, let me see what you can do type thing, rather than, here's a 50-year-old guy at the end of his career who doesn't want to put anybody over. Yeah,
and look, there's a lot of speculation around AJ Styles. There's a lot of people in AEW to expect that he's coming in. But I don't know. You kind of have a different feeling about people that have been on the independents for so long previously. And, he was in TNA for so long. So I don't know what you'd get from that, but I wouldn't be surprised either. But that's one for down the way. And then on the way out, obviously, Rey Fenix is going to debut on SmackDown next week in Chicago, which makes all the sense in the world to me, being that, you know, huge Latino community in Chicago, same as debuting Penta in San Jose. I think they've got that right. And then Saraya followed Zack Knight out of AEW this week. Not officially off the roster page, it has to be said, so in terms of the way the company see it, she's not officially finished up, but she confirmed herself that they split. They were paying her a lot of money to not do very much. And I think it's hard because when you look at it, you think, as a manager, and for the development of Harley Cameron, she had some value.
She was great as a manager. She was absolutely fucking hilarious, right? Her at ringside, shrieking like a banshee, was very funny, and she had good comedic timing. She was good as a promo. She understood what she was doing. This is one of those things where it was like, people sort of got annoyed because they were like, she's getting paid a lot of money. And I'm kind of like, I don't kind of care. Like, I care, I don't care what Tony Khan is paying the wrestlers. I care if it prevents him from getting other talent because of a budget or whatever. But like, she was doing fine. Like, I can't say she was lighting the world on fire, but she also, like, after she came into a point, wasn't getting pushed beyond, you know, the initial push where she won the title, which was ridiculous. But, you know, she certainly didn't mean anything for them from a box office standpoint, the way that I think they expected that she would.
No, and I guess when they brought her in, you know, it was right after the kind of the all-out 2022 stuff, and I think they felt like they needed a win. Yeah. And they did that, but then I felt like they kind of chopped their own knees off in terms of putting her against Britt Baker, and Britt Baker's doing the kind of, you know, I'm the AEW original and that sort of thing. Yeah. And it very much muddied the waters at the start in terms of general kind of fan reception. And yeah, she didn't have a huge number impact. I don't think many people expected to do. I think the part of it was, you know, she was there for partners. You know, we've seen some of the material that AEW sent to WBD where they make a huge point out of her social media numbers. You know, that was, something they definitely thought there was some value in. But at the end of the day, you know, social media numbers are one thing, but in order to put her kind of regularly on the show, you need a bit more than that. Right. And I don't think she was probably wanted to stay as just a manager. I don't think that's a role that she thought she could play. And it's been clear in the recent months, you know, that AEW didn't have much for her to do at the current time. So I think it makes sense for both parties, to be honest. And I actually wish there was more people that looked at it and felt that way sometimes.
Well, I also think they clearly have like a line that they're pushing, right? Like, you know, she did everything she could there is the thing that everybody keeps saying. So I feel like there's definitely like, you know, but she's going out on pleasant terms. She's not pissy. She doesn't seem unhappy. She's just like, oh yeah, it's the end of the chapter. Thanks so much. Like, you know, we'll see if she does go back to WWE and they try to push some kind of anti-AEW agenda interview thing. But like, for the most part, like, this is the kind of exit you want to see, right? There's not a lot for her to do. She was making a lot of money. They decided to offload her. She's very happy. They let her go.
They've got Evolution coming up, and she's going to go back to WWE for that.
Yeah, probably.
They'll bring everybody back for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Trish,
including
Lita.
Stephanie. She's
Stephanie,
the Women's Revolution.
Oh, there's no way she's not involved with it now with the way they're kind of integrating her back into their content. Yeah, but I can imagine Paige, I can see that being part of that. And, you know, that's not the way, if I was going to do an all-female pay-per-view, that I would look at doing it, is by then rely, but who am I to talk about nostalgia names, you know? Like, but yeah, I think that's it. We did get a mailbag question from Sean. Yes. On something similar around people kind of coming and going. Do you have any news on the people MIA in AEW at the moment? Camille, as well as Taven and Bennett, all seem to have disappeared without as much as a thought, and I'm beginning to doubt that I ever saw a hype video return vignettes for Scorpio Sky last year on Collision. Help me out. Did any of these people actually exist?
Sean, this was very funny.
I laughed quite hard when I saw actually, did any of these people exist? Like,
I think everyone is very quiet about it, but it's clear that something happened with Camille that, you know, was not positive, and it doesn't seem like she will ever be back in AEW.
I don't think so. I know Tony was going on about she might pop up at some point, but they had the movie come out that she played a massive role in, and they hyped it with Tony and with other people, and it was radio silence.
Yeah, she was never mentioned.
No, and so you had someone that's on your books, on your roster, part of something like that, and you have no involvement. That doesn't say to me someone's coming back anytime soon.
Right.
And it's funny because if you think back to when that happened, when they did the breakup and people were insisting there was going to be a Mercedes and Camille match, and I think it was Brian Alvarez that was like, it's not happening.
Right.
And lo and behold, it's not happening. So there's obviously a story there as to what it case would be. Yeah, I don't see it. Maybe, she'll come back and do the odd thing, but the thing is with Tony is once someone is kind of out of sight, out of mind, they very much are so. And it's very difficult for anybody to come back in from that kind of point. We're seeing it with, Britt Baker's disappeared again. Scorpio Sky, they just changed that direction and now they're not using him. And I do think it's probably, and Taven and Bennett, the writing's been on the wall since they reformed Undisputed Kingdom, and the Kingdom weren't part of it. It's Undisputed with no Kingdom, but it's very hard to see kind of positive endings for any of these people. And I think that's my sometimes biggest frustration, not just with Tony, but in wrestling in general, is when people aren't getting used and they're sat home and there's no kind of, not even explanation for us, but in terms of sometimes, there's no explanation to them. It is really much just radio silence. And I don't think that, from a work perspective, I don't see how that's legal to me. I don't, this is a British thing, because I know America's
it's the United
different.
States. We don't give a shit about workers.
Of course, yeah, but it's the same as, I used a football example a few months ago. Chloe Kelly was at Manchester City, who's now playing at Arsenal on loan. Wasn't playing, wasn't getting game time. It was affecting her England career, so her career kind of aspects outside of, the club she was playing for. And actually, that's not an acceptable measure. This is someone who's more than capable. So then eventually a move is forced. And I think in wrestling, then there needs to be some adjustment at some point, because people just kind of being sat at home, I don't see the benefits of that to anybody. But I know we're in a wrestling war, and I know it's the US and everything's different, but yeah, it's hard because once he's written you out, you don't come back very often. I think we've seen that as a bit of a theme through the years now.
Which is funny, because I don't think that if you're trying not to let people go because you don't want them to end up in WWE, I think we've seen that, for both AEW and WWE, the impact of those debuts has kind of been lessened. You talked about that, episodes ago, but, Penta is going to move merch and he's doing fine, but he's certainly not, setting the world on fire over at WWE the way that I think,
he gets more opportunity, he gets more promo opportunity than he ever would have got in AEW, and he's getting kind of more regular screen time than he would. So
I don't mean that as a rebuke of him. I don't mean that as a rebuke of him making the decision to leave. I don't think he made a mistake, but I think the excitement of him debuting and the excitement of Phoenix debuting is less than it might have been a few years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ricky Starks has had no impact whatsoever.
Ricky Saints.
I forgot to use that stupid name.
Ricky Saints.
It sounds.
Ricky Saints.
Do you know what it sounds like to me? It sounds like a character on one of the what's the skateboard games? The Tony Hawk games.
Tony Hawk.
Yeah.
Skate Pro.
Yeah, one of the ones we used to play on the PC and I'm old. Or PlayStation 1, But that's just sounds
decrepit.
Like Ricky Saints.
Ricky Saints.
But yeah, that's had very little impact whatsoever, and is now a reminder. And this is always what we say, that, the first jump, the first big jumps are always the ones that kind of have the biggest impact. And in this case for WWE, it was Cody Rhodes. And then what you're having is you're having all these other jumps from AEW to WWE that are having less and less impact, but then also clogging everything else up and reducing opportunities for those that were there previously. And then you have all the other problems that come with it. So yeah, it's a case, we're at the point at the moment where both companies have far too many people on their books, really. Yeah. But they don't want to allow anybody else to have them. So it's all my toys in my toy box, doesn't matter how many toy boxes I've got. But it's not always a healthy work environment, across the board in terms of people being able to kind of illustrate their skills, so kind of create kind of better career prospects for themselves after as well. So yeah, I find it frustrating. I just think as soon as what you don't want is, especially as like a lower middle card wrestler, is to disappear. Even if you're on Ring of Honor, at least you're in eyesight.
Yeah.
Not maybe for most of us who don't subscribe to Ring of Honor, but in terms of Tony, at least you're in eyesight, because as soon as you're out of eyesight, that's kind of it. So yeah, they did exist. They may not now, they might not anymore. Not in AEW, but we shall see. We shall see. I felt really harsh. I didn't mean it to sound that harsh. The other one of the other news points from this week has been the adjustments to Collision. So they ran 2 separate 1-hour shows behind the NCAA tournament last weekend, and then we have the Thursday night Collision in Boston. Are you going?
I don't know. There's still tickets available for Collision.
Do you need to convince Leah? Is that where we're going here?
I don't think there's going to be any convincing Leah, because I think she'd have to move taping Tunnel Talk, and I don't see that happening. I was like, "Are we going to the Dynamite?" And she was like, "Absolutely not." That's the Young Bucks' fault right there. I'll tell you that for free. Young Bucks and not being able to see Chuck Taylor in a dark match, which we absolutely would have gotten. But I also am in a kind of spot where I am aware that AEW television is better than it was. Like, I think it's better now than it was in January significantly, but it's less of the people that I like to see on a regular basis.
You don't see them in front of a crowd.
Right. I'm not like, oh my God, I can't miss this. Like, like I said, again, and I'm not trying to shit on Mark Davis. Like, he seems like a lovely guy, but like, I'm not exactly like going to stay up late and spend money and do all this for a Mark Davis match or a Mark Briscoe match. So which is kind of a shitty attitude, but that's kind of where I'm at right now.
But that's that thing about, sometimes when we look at the live gates, and I know that the Milwaukee show did better than the September one that came straight around All Out time. And I think they've got a Baltimore one, I think is the only one, it's the one I've identified that probably might surpass the last time it was there as well. But I think sometimes when you look at the live numbers and you're looking for this turnaround, and that's probably now because of Max, that's where we feel like we're going to see most evidence. And one of the things that probably hampers that is that you don't see a lot of the top people or the people you want to see in front of the crowd. You don't. And
right.
The lineups are still the same. The lineups don't represent the posters, and that don't represent who you're actually going to see. So then it becomes like you wait until you see what the card is, and if it's not, then you just skip over it. And I think that might be hurting the signs of seeing a huge recovery in terms of attendance, because that's still being, the live event experience in some ways is still being hampered. So I do think that's the thing.
They're going to do a Ring of Honor matches. They'll film Ring of Honor matches, which is great. But again, nobody that I'm like, oh my God. And, you're not like used to, like we talked about this repeatedly. Like they came in the first couple of years, you saw every fucking buddy on that show. You saw everybody on that show between Dark and Dark Elevation. Mm-hmm. You saw everybody on that TV show, and it was awesome.
And they wrestled.
And they wrestled. And now it's like, maybe I'll see somebody that I really like in a pre-tape backstage, like it's just...
you could have sat at home, and it's, again, at the end of the day, it's time, money, investment, and it has to be worth your time and money. So you shouldn't feel guilty about that. It's more about, they have to put on that product for you to feel like that's worth justifying. It's not the other way around. There's not a loyalty factor to a company. No, it works the other way. Right. But in terms of that show itself, so that show is going to be on Thursday, the 17th of April, and that will be broadcast live. It will go out live on TNT. And I know there's a big fuss because it's WrestleMania weekend, so they will void WrestleMania weekend. But when we were brought this information through a friend of ours through the WBD kind of release for the month, it was stuck in because they couldn't move it to the Friday night because of the play-in tournament that they're holding for the NBA playoffs. And then Saturday is the first full day of the NBA playoffs, so you're likely going to have back-to-back games on TNT. So it would have been moved anyway, or what was happening last year. The difference is that they're actually being moved now. So you have situations where, like with Grand Slam and with these collisions last week, where they're using the lead out for a major sports event to kind of gain for Collision, and then they're able to move them rather than having them cancelled, which is what was happening last year. So they were just losing a week of TV. Whereas this year, we're going to move it to the Thursday night. I think the Thursday is interesting because you can then test how that kind of Thursday performs.
Yeah.
And with the NBA leaving kind of the end of June, you then have that kind of open pocket where you can say, hey, this is how our product performs on this. And this is why the kind of lead-ins are also important, because what they also do is help them generate kind of stronger numbers for the Collision as a brand to put to the network and to put to advertisers, which could help them when it comes to navigating a move. Because Collision gets hampered by the fact that it goes so often against, now Saturday night main events, going against these pay-per-views that lower their average down dramatically. So then you use these sporting events to kind of push that back up. And then you can hopefully have the biggest number possible when you're looking at, do we get to move to Thursday? Or even just for, ad rates and that sort of thing in terms of value to the network. So there's a huge value in taking these lead-in aspects, but also it might help them in terms of trying to convince the network that Thursday could be, a real proposition for them.
I think a move to Thursday would be a positive one. I think it would help them with the, touring. It might be a little bit more difficult to sell if you have to be in the same venue 2 nights.
It definitely will, because Saturday's an easiest night to sell the midweek, and they've had problems with Wednesday, Thursday. We can see it in Boston.
Yes.
Dynamite's way ahead of Collision.
Yeah. But I think from a viewing perspective, they'd do better on a Thursday than a Saturday.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. I think they should load that one up. If you really after Thursday, you should be loading, that weekend of shows up. Week of shows up. I don't really care about I know a lot of people care about the covering off the Nitro number of episodes, and I'm sure for Tony that would be important. I couldn't care less, but the bigger thing would be to deliver those 2 nights back to back, and hopefully something strong rating wise, and improve that position for them. So. Moving off AEW, it's a busy couple of weeks coming up, and Sakura Genesis is next Saturday.
Dun dun dun.
And Windy City Riot is the following Friday in Chicago with Tanahashi and Takeshita. So David Finlay won the New Japan Cup. I wonder where we might have predicted that. No. So. Yeah, so if you go back and you listen to our very kind of the episode just after Wrestle Kingdom where we sound like I'm under the sea, you might have actually heard a slight prediction that kind of would relate to the next 2 challengers who were winning the belt, and because we had some information at the time, and the information at the time was that Goto was going to win, and I got that from somebody and then had it confirmed by somebody else, and the follow-up was going to be David Finlay, and we'll see if that halts. I expect it to. They've ran through numerous challenges, so he's been racking up defenses, Goto, since winning the belt in Osaka, and it feels like the right time. And the key thing is you put the belt on David Finlay, you're putting it on at your traditional point where you put a belt on a first-time champion. They tend to do something in the spring and through to like Dominion, and then put it back on someone more experienced for the G1. Probably the interesting thing is when you look at who their experienced title holders to hold it will be Goto and Zack Sabre Jr. And if David Finlay wins Sakura Genesis, he's going to face Zack in Chicago, so that's going to be his first defense. So the likelihood is that you then rule Zack out. But I don't think it's a bad choice. And I think there's a lot of people dragging their feet on Finlay at the moment because it's David Finlay. And Goto as well. We'll talk about Goto in a second, but there's definitely some dragging feet on David Finlay because, they recognise where he was 3-4 years ago, and they don't recognise the changes that he's made, alongside Gato, who plays a big part in all of these guys that have been with him from JY and Okada through to Finlay now. And it's like, he is so much better in the ring. He has so much more control. He's so much better at getting emotions now as a heel than he was even 12 months ago. And even in a short run, he's not going to go out and disgrace himself out there. He'll be absolutely be able to kind of handle it because he's worked himself into that position. Look at Wrestle Kingdom. For me, I thought the best match on the card and the one that got the most out of the crowd wasn't the main event. Oh God, let's maybe not repeat the main event. Wasn't even. It was awful. Not even Shingo and Takeshita. No, it was Yota Tsuji and David Finlay. So he knows how to work in that role. I think he got more out of Shota Umino in the New Japan Cup final than anybody's been able to do for maybe over a year. So he's ready for it. He was always coming back to New Japan for it, was always a line that we've always been told. He wasn't going to WWE for the Royal Rumble or anything else. So funny sometimes. So, he's into that. But the other thing is that I think the reason people are undermining this in terms of how important it is to New Japan fans or how much it's resonated is because this is a really emotional story, right? This story isn't built on this is the best wrestler in the world. Although, Finley's probably in the top 20 in the last year. It's not built on that. It's built on this emotion of this whole story of, Finley having to withdraw from last year's New Japan Cup because of, illness. And then them falling into this Goto thing where he was trying to win for his father and then playing it into the summer when, they did the thing in the G1 and the kind of the Goto triumph in front of Korakuen. And then they realised they're onto something. And it's because it had captured people in a way that, a lot of standard wrestling matches weren't in New Japan. And then they knew it had it. And then you get that thing in Osaka and, where Goto wins the belt in front of more people than anybody else during COVID in that venue for a New Beginning show. Not the Zack Sabre Jr. Bryan Danielson match in the steel cage, War Dogs thing, or and that show also had the last match of big match for Okada and Tanahashi. No, it beat that one. And then you do the anniversary show with Goto, and with Tanahashi, and it beats all the anniversary shows since during COVID before that. It beats kind of what have I written on here? It's actually the biggest number in Otter Gymnasium since COVID began. Beat the Ospreay Okada G1 match. Beat the ridiculously the highest attended match in Otter Gymnasium during COVID before that was the Best of Super Junior finals between Titan and Master Wato. Yeah. Oof. Don't tell me people know what draws and what doesn't. No one would have had that one down. No one would have had that down. No, and then, you go into the New Japan Cup and, the tour amount, the overall amount of the tour, which was actually up on last year, is driven by the final being up with Umino and Finlay and the Goto defense against Yuji Nagata. I mean, we're not talking Tetsuya Naito here, ticket sale wise. We're talking Yuji Nagata up in Nagoya, which added an extra 1,000 on from what they did previous year in the New Japan Cup. Goto is tucked into something emotionally that has got this audience invested, and the whole thing is related to David Finlay, so everything is intertwined with them, and that will be enough to carry this at Sakura Genesis. This is probably going to be one of the hottest matches in terms of atmosphere that they've had in outside of that Osaka title win for a very long time, and I think that's why it's missing. So people just see the names, right? They see Goto, permanent mid-carder, could never quite get the job done in terms of being a champion. And then they look at David Finlay and they think, he was just like the secondary to JY and this and that. But he is doing a great job of trying to cast his own kind of shadow and who he is and not being Bullet Club. I'm the War Dogs guy. We're gonna eradicate all the kind of Bullet Club kind of labeling and that sort of thing. And then Goto is. Do you know what's funny is Goto is doing exactly in a way what AEW wanted from Bryan Danielson last year. But couldn't. So, trying, yeah, but the fact is that, what, if you put a belt on Finlay, you want to put it back and Goto for the G1, you can do that at Dominion, and it'll be even bigger, because, you're going back to, Tokyo, where Finlay made Goto's kids cry and everything like that. So you're just building this on emotional resonance, and it's building, and that's why it feels so different from so much in New Japan in recent years. And in any company, if you can tack in on something like that, and then you've got great workers as well, then this is what you're going to get. And this is why they're getting the results they're getting. And they're kind of the lull that we felt at the first part of the year, especially with having no new beginning show in Nagoya, no new beginning show in Sapporo. It's kind of, on the low kind of numbers for Dynasty and Wrestle Kingdom. We can argue about the split shows and whatever, but I feel like they're building off the back of that. And in the meantime, you have all the other young guys kind of fletching through, and you're making your stories for Umino. You're matching up your units again. Finally, we're going to get some new units because so many of them are redundant. Probably United Empire once future changes are kind of made there in the next few weeks as well. So you kind of have some movement, and I think this is the key to what's happening in Japan in terms of attendance resurgence that you're seeing in Noah, that you're seeing in Stardom. It's new faces, and it's the same here as well. So you catch something emotionally, same way Stardom have with this loser kind of retires match coming up in the end of April as well. It's just all about capturing that emotion and then putting new people in these spots. Same with Ozawa and Noah. And it's all been slept on. People aren't looking maybe east as much as they normally would because obviously it's a huge WrestleMania season and everything else that's going on, and we just have Revolution. But I do think that the quality of what we're seeing in terms of that sort of thing is just so much better. Oh my God, if I have to watch another Noah show from 2003 ever again, just shoot me. It's like it's so different now, and it's so much more kind of worth investing in. So yeah, that's my my little New Japan thing. So is David Finlay winning next week, Sarah?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, let's go with that. Just before we close, I want to ask that anybody who has not seen it goes to YouTube and types in AAA, I know that sounds crazy, and watches the video of La Parka's return with the incredible dub music. Like, it's the best dub ever, because I can't have Thriller, so La Parka always had is Thriller as the music. So watch what they've done instead, because, oh my God, it's pure AAA.
It is pretty good.
Yeah, you just have to see it. It's pure AAA.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Strong recommendation from us.
Yes. Don't watch the rest of the show unless you want to watch the tag match, which is an absolute disaster. Honestly, right? It's just like, oh my God, you actually start to cringe because things are going that badly, and then you actually watch Jeff Jarrett going, I'm not dying here, and just running out of the way and dives. Like, not catching that. Like, why would I catch that? I'm going to die. When you've seen how much poor Sam Adonis was getting battered up. But yeah, don't watch the show. Just watch the La Parka thing. Okay, I think that's it. Have you got anything else? Are we
no,
we good? Cool.
We covered everything. Very interested to see how Dynasty goes next week.
Yeah, well, it's a big weekend because there's that and Sakura Genesis and a number of other big shows as well. So yeah, if you want a mini kind of wrestling week or weekend, and you're not interested in not WrestleMania week, then this is a big weekend for everybody. So there we are. I'm rambling now, so we'll just close.
You do it so well, though.
Okay.
Sorry, no compliments. No compliments. No compliments. Sorry.
Yeah, I've already told producer Leah off for compliments twice today, so we cannot continue. But we'll give producer Leah a compliment, because I'll say thank you, producer Leah of Tunnel Talk, for basically sourcing us out and getting everything kind of straight, looking after us, making all this go up on time, because if I had to do it, it wouldn't happen. And for putting out great audio with Tunnel Talk every week, which comes out every Sunday on the Social Suplex Network. You can also listen to all the other great podcasts on the Social Suplex Network on any of your own podcasts. Oh my God, podcast providers.
That's a tough one, though.
Podcast
like, realistically,
providers.
I couldn't say podcast providers 5 times fast. Podcast providers, podcast providers, podcast providers, podcast. All right, maybe I could, but whatever. Yeah, it's fine. That's what they call negging, folks. She'll never leave me for another podcast host if I tell her how terrible she is. I learned that from incels.
No one else could put up with me, to be fair, so I don't think it would happen. Anyway, yeah, you can listen to all the other great podcasts on the Suplex Network on your own podcast provider or at Red Circle. You can also join the Social Suplex Discord if you wish to speak to us, speak to any of the other podcast hosts, or just interact with other great wrestling fans. You can contact us if you need anything, any questions, any queries, any feedback, any names, I don't know, you take your pick. You can do that at Trish and Sarah pod@gmail.com. Oh my god.
Yep. Nope. Keep going. You're good. You got it.
This is so bad.
Trish and Sarah pod@gmail.com.
Thank you.
Trish and Sarah on Twitter.
Yes.
Our individual handles on Blue Sky. See, I'm teeing it up for you. I'm teeing it up for you to shit on me. Eventually
Sarah's
one day.
never fixing the Blue Sky. She can't
I'm
fix
not.
it.
I'm going to. I'm gonna. It's just. Ugh. I just remember
It's
what
not
the password is.
Yeah, it's just not an easy one to get around, but we'll get there. You can also support us with buying a really cool piece of merchandise for anyone at the network, but also for ourselves at www.chopped-tees.com/Trish and Sarah. Until next time, we're going to be back in 2 weeks. Hope you all enjoy the shows over the weekend. I have been Trish.
I've been Sarah.
You nearly forgot that then.
I nearly forgot
that. Anyway.
Tremendous job by us.
Tremendous
close.
This is one of the all-time worst closes ever.
Professional podcasting in action, folks.
Yeah, this is why we're never making the Observer. Anyway, this has been the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. We thank you for listening. Good night.